Shalom and welcome to Jewels of Judaism. In today's video, I want to answer the question, what is the sin leading to death? Now we read about this sin which leads to death in 1 John chapter 5. It's in the context of prayer. The first two verses say this in 1 John 5 verses 14 and 15. This is the confidence which we have before him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And if we know that he hears us in whatever we ask, we know that we have the requests which we have asked from him. This is a very encouraging word about prayer and the confidence that we have to ask according to his will, knowing that he hears us and that he will respond to these requests according to his perfect will. It's very encouraging. However, immediately after that, in verse 16, we read this verse. If anyone sees his brother committing sin, a sin not leading to death, he shall ask, and God will for him give life to those who commit sin not leading to death. There is a sin leading to death. I do not say that he should make requests for this. Wow. What is this about? What is this sin which leads to death? Now, let me just say this. I believe the Bible is our book of truth. And most of the Bible is fairly simple to understand. However, there are some verses which are a bit more complicated and difficult to understand. And this is one of those verses. Now, there is no absolute answer to this question. It's not black and white. However, I do believe that through the counsel of the Bible, there is a relatively sound answer that we can apply to this question of what is the sin which leads to death. I also want to mention that in the Greek, it doesn't seem like it's one sin. It's not a sin which leads to death. It's sin which leads to death. And it could be any number of sins or a category of sin. So what is these sins or the sin which leads to death? I believe we'll find the answer in this week's Torah portion. It's found in Deuteronomy chapter 21. Now in the Torah itself, there are many examples of sin which leads to death. Sin which is punishable by death. And we see one of those examples today in Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 18 to 21. I want to read this situation. It says this, if a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and though they discipline him, will not listen to them, then his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his city, at the gate of the place where he lives. And they shall say to the elders of his city, this our son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of the city shall stone him to death with stones. So you shall purge the evil from your midst, and all Israel shall hear and fear. Wow, this is an intense command of dealing with a stubborn and rebellious child. Now, I don't believe that we are still under the restrictions or the guidelines, the commands of the Old Covenant as far as living out everything exactly how it is instructed. We are under the New Covenant, so I don't believe we need to stone our rebellious children. However, I believe this principle of sin unto death is clearly illustrated here. And we see someone who is part of Am Israel, part of the people of Israel, part of the community of God. And this individual is continually rebellious, stubborn. He does not respond to the discipline or chastisement of his parents. And he's living a life that is just sinful and unholy. He's not willing to repent. This goes on and on. There is never any change. So eventually the parents give up and bring their child to the city elders, and they cast their judgment upon him, and he is killed. Now, this illustrates for us sin, not a particular sin, but rather rebellion, an unrepentant heart, not willing to turn from sin, which eventually leads to death. And I believe that this is the key to understanding the warning in 1 John 5. It's not that there's one sin which leads to death, but rather someone who's part of the believing community, who is walking in sin, and is not willing to repent, although they are disciplined, although they are confronted, although they are brought before the congregation, if someone wants to continue in their sin, there is no other path to take with them. They need to be cast out, as the New Testament clearly instructs. And I believe that this is the kind of person we are not to pray for. Any person who calls himself a believer and is unrepentant concerning sin continually, then we should not be praying for them. I believe that this is the warning in 1 John chapter 5. So the sin unto death is a continual, unrepentant spirit. Now, let me just clarify that when Peter asked Yeshua, how many times should I forgive my brother? Up to 7 times? And Yeshua said, not 7, but I say unto you 70 times 7. Unlimited. There is no limit to how much we should forgive someone who repents from sin. However, we're talking about someone who never repents, who doesn't want to acknowledge their sin. We need to be careful in our prayer life and how we are praying for others. We need to know the people we're praying for. And there's certain things we shouldn't pray about, or certain people we shouldn't pray for if they're in this condition. There's a warning here in 1 John 5, and I think we need to understand it. And I think the reason that God didn't give a specific sin or clearly laid out black and white, he wants us to kind of wrestle with this and understand it in our context that we live in our community. So that, I believe, is the answer. The sin unto death is that unrepentant spirit towards sin. No turning. Just continuing in sin despite claiming to be part of the community of God, claiming to be a believer. I've given you a very short overview of my full commentary, which is found on my website, jewelsofjudaism.com, under the title Authority in Prayer. You can also click on it in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. There's a little information link that's provided as well. I hope you'll read it. If you've enjoyed this video, please like it on YouTube. Please feel free to share it with others. Thank you, and Shabbat Shalom.